Let me show you something. This is what pizza dough looks like if you age it in the refrigerator for a week. And this is the loaf of bread that I just baked with it. My kids call it pizza bread. It is insanely crispy and flavorful. Sure, people have been making something similar for centuries using a sourdough starter or biga or some other kind of pre-ferment. But the thing is, none of that is really necessary anymore in the age of refrigeration. The easy way these days is to mix up some dough, throw it in the fridge, and forget about it for a while. Just as the easy way to make and run a website these days is with Squarespace, the sponsor of this video. To get your website fermenting, go to squarespace.com, and when you're ready to take it out of the oven and publish it, use my link and code down in the description and you'll save 10%. I'm going to show you how pizza dough changes as it ages in the fridge, day by day for a week, and how that aging will get you different baked results. Got to start with a giant batch of my standard pizza dough recipe. Half a cup of warm water with 2 teaspoons of sugar and 2 teaspoons of yeast. Stir it around and let it bloom for 5 minutes just to make sure the yeast is still alive. If you want to live dangerously, you can skip this step. All right, 4 cups more water go in, 2 more tablespoons of sugar, 2 tablespoons of salt, big glug of olive oil, maybe a quarter cup, stir it around, that's trippy. Then I'll start with 10 cups of bread flour, anticipating that I'll probably add more flour as I need. Bring it together as far as possible with a spatula, and then I'll get in there with my hand. Pizza dough has a better flavor and texture when it's really wet and sticky, so I'm just adding just enough flour to make kneading possible. Yes, I'm exploring options for no-knead pizza dough recipes. I just haven't gotten one to work yet to my satisfaction, not chewy enough. You want to knead this until you can stretch it thin without it tearing, like that. That took me 7 minutes. All right, 8 sample containers. Glass is best. It will not leach out chemicals during the long rise. A little olive oil in each, maybe more than the pros would use, but having a dough that's coated in oil will help it brown at home oven temperatures. That's also why the sugar is in there, to enhance browning. And this is one of the rare times that I will use a food scale. Zero out the weight of the bowl, then weigh the dough and divide by 8. Circa 300 grams of dough is good for one 12 or 13-inch pizza or one pizza bread, which is what we're making this time. I normally don't bother with weighing things, but this is where it really helps you when you're cooking at an almost commercial scale. Our human brain has a great intuitive sense for small quantities, but when things get big, not so much. Hard to eyeball. I'll use each ball to oil its container, thus oiling itself in the process. Cover, it can be sealed, the yeast have enough air in there, and let's label them. Samples 2 through 8 go straight in the fridge. Sample number 1, let's just let it rise on the table for 2 hours, and then let's take it out and bake it straight away. This is the bottom side of the dough, which I've now got facing up on the plate, and note how it looks exactly the same as the top side, very smooth. And here's how you make what my kids call pizza bread. Coat the surface with plenty of olive oil, grind on pepper, shake over plenty of garlic powder, and then sprinkle on a good amount of really big, crunchy, flaky salt. My pizza stone has been preheating for half an hour at maximum convection oven temperature. My pizza steel tends to burn this bread. And I just pull the stone out a bit and drop on the dough. Bake it until it's brown, 7 or 8 minutes, pull it off with tongs onto a cooling rack, and there it is. Bottom's nice. I cut it once lengthwise and then into a bunch of little strips. Note how big those bubbles are on the inside. Remember that. It tastes okay, but the flavor is just kind of bland, and the texture is very soft and pillowy. It's not crispy, and it's only a little chewy. This is an inferior product. 24 hours later, the doughs in the fridge have risen a lot, despite the fact that we threw them in there straight away. Some people say you gotta rise them at room temperature for an hour or so before you refrigerate, but that is manifestly not necessary. Dough number 2 comes out, and look at the underside. It's rougher. It's kind of bubbly now. That rough surface holds more oil and goes crisp in the oven. Olive oil, pepper, garlic powder, salt. Drop the dough on. It's so much easier to handle when it's cold. It's stiffer. Bake it at 550 Fahrenheit or whatever your oven can manage until brown, and note the bubble structure this time. It's finer. A slow, cold rise gets you the same amount of air, but it's divided among a larger number of smaller bubbles, and for pizza crust, I prefer that texture. Flavor is still a little bit flat, but the texture is a bit less pillowy. We're getting a bit of crunch, a little bit of chew. Sample number 3, 48 hours of cold rise. Dough is a little stickier, and it's starting to smell a bit like beer. Stretch it into a little oval, top it, throw it on the stone. You want to be careful about not letting the garlic powder burn, which happens really easily and it tastes nasty. If I see a few grains turning black, out it comes.
Cut it up. Texture is still a little pillowy in a bad way, but the flavor is now improved, getting that yeasty fermented flavor. Sample number 4, 72 hours of cold rise. Dough is getting really sticky, and look at how uneven that underside is. Nice bubbly surface that'll hold oil and bake up crisp. You gotta bake this dough bottom side up. Plop! I usually drop it on rather than deliver it with a pizza peel because the oil tends to make it stick to the peel. Out it comes, and you can hear the surface is getting much crispier. I would guess that this is due to the starches breaking down as it ferments, breaking down into simpler sugars that caramelize more readily in the oven, but that's just a guess. It's starting to get that glassy top, though. Love it. It's hump day, midpoint of the experiment, dough number 5, 4 days of cold rise, and this is when I start to notice a delicious smell like ripe banana, both when it's raw and when it's cooked. Oh, that looks like the Millennium Falcon. Don't sue me, Lucasfilm. Sample number 6, 5 days cold rise, and look how gooey that dough is looking. If it wasn't cold, it would be all but impossible to handle. I underbaked that one a little bit, but the flavor is still insane. It's got that ripe banana note, funky, complex, great stuff. The penultimate example, 6 days of cold rise, out it comes, and that top is getting so crispy. It's also notable how much chewier the interior is. With a wet dough, given enough time, gluten kind of develops itself, basically kneads your dough for you some more in the fridge. And now the finale, a full week of cold rise. Dough is super gooey and sticky. It would be impossible to handle if it weren't cold. Underside is now the top. Look at how craggy it is. Oil just soaks in there. Careful about the pepper. You can really taste its spice in this. Don't use more than you'd like. Good coating of garlic powder. You could use fresh garlic, but that'd just be a different flavor. The powder gives you more of an umami taste, I think. And you gotta use some big flaky salt. The texture is amazing with that. At this point, the dough is so soft that it is hard to handle even cold. It's stuck on the way down. There you go. 7 or 8 minutes later, out it comes. Underside is brown. My pizza steel tends to make it black. I prefer the stone for this. And you want to hear how crispy that top is now? Let me get the mic. Nice. And the flavor? I mean, you could say that it's like sourdough, but as a matter of semantics, it is sourdough, right? Could you get a similar result using the traditional sourdough starter? Probably, but do you want to get a starter going, feed it once or twice a day for a week, and then have to keep it alive in the corner like a goldfish in perpetuity? Or do you want to mix up some dough, throw it in the fridge, and just forget about it for a while? I'm going the easy way.
And while I could also code a website by hand, I have some basic skills in that area. That is not a thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to use Squarespace. Whether you want to start a blog, make a portfolio, advertise your business, or build a whole online store, Squarespace has the elegant and functional template that you need. If you want to buy a custom domain like adamragusia.com, you can do that through Squarespace, and they'll set you up with a beautiful parking page until you're ready to publish your site. And when you're ready to do that, go to squarespace.com/Ragusia and enter my offer code Ragusia. You'll get 10% off either the domain or the site. Squarespace is a one-stop shop. Anything you need to create and run your site, they've got it for you. Using anything else is just doing it the hard way, like making your dough with some kind of pre-ferment or something. Just throw it in the fridge and wait. Thanks to Squarespace for sponsoring this video. Now I gotta take this out to the kids.